Welcome to the global interview series on hydrogen, where we slice through the buzz, especially that of green hydrogen, and ask realistically what is next for this market, which many are calling the new oil of the 21st century. Very glad to have Dr. 𝗕cie𝗺�57, the CEO at Uniper Hydrogen, with us today. Hi, Axel.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us. I think we've got a lot to get through. Let's start with money. The Hydrogen Council said at least $300 billion is expected to be invested globally over the next decade by the public and private sectors. And this is obviously in a post-COVID environment, this number is sticking. With some of the industry projecting that if successful, and that's still an if, that's a capital, an I and an F, hydrogen could one day help meet almost a fifth of global energy demand. So far, only $80 billion has been committed. So we have this huge $220 billion gap. How are we going to fill it? Are you confident that it can be done in order to scale up hydrogen to meet that 20% demand point?
Yeah, first of all, it's a good question, and it shows the unprecedented momentum we have globally in hydrogen. And I'm quite confident that we can meet this. First of all, I think we have to differentiate what are we really talking about in terms of hydrogen.
Indeed.
Grey hydrogen is still mainly used at present, but it's produced with fossil fuels and hence pollutes the environment with CO2. And that's one of the reasons why I would like to decarbonize the hydrogen economy. And there, of course, we have got several options. We have green hydrogen, which you already mentioned, and that is normally we use green electricity to feed an electrolysis, and by that we produce renewable green hydrogen.
And this is really the market that there's so much excitement about already, isn't there? Because hydrogen itself is not new in terms of industrial use, but it's the green hydrogen.
Absolutely, that's most of the excitement about. However, I wouldn't limit it to green hydrogen, and I think the Hydrogen Council doesn't limit it either.
No.
So we also have the blue hydrogen, which then would combine the traditional hydrogen with carbon capture storage and carbon capture usage. And we have additional innovative forms such as pyrolysis and gas splitting. So coming to your question, why am I confident? What has to happen to really spend that money and have those huge investments? I think in a decade, first of all, we need a proper political and regulatory framework and incentive schemes. And that is twofold. One is that on the customer side, we need the incentive to really purchase decarbonized hydrogen, which isn't the case at the moment.
No.
Because just grey hydrogen is economically more feasible. And CO2 prices, of course, they play a role in that. So with increasing CO2 prices, automatically the decarbonized hydrogen would become more relevant. And then as
that in itself is another huge conversation, isn't it, that needs to be tackled.
Oh
properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not go into that one because
we don't. Yes, indeed.
But there is a correlation. There is a link among those two. So what else has to happen? Of course, we have to decrease the production cost of hydrogen. So what does that mean? If we're talking green hydrogen, then a big element in that is the electricity cost, the cost of electricity produced. And there, of course, we need the cheapest renewable possible. And that is, with a certain likelihood also in the sunbelt, such as the MENA region. And that is certainly one of the topics we have got today. So a huge opportunity also for the Middle East.
One that they're grabbing.
One that they're grabbing. And also we have to decrease by economies of scale the cost of electrolysis and of those stacks. And I think that will come automatically once we have started with projects, once we have the experience, and once the OEMs are really producing those stacks of electrolysis in a larger scale.
Do you think that $220 billion gap though in 10 years, do you think that's, you say you're confident about it, but and obviously with all the steps you've just mentioned that need to be done in order to get to that point, from the investor's point of view, do you see there's enough appetite, there's enough confidence in this market? Because hydrogen has had a few false starts over the years, and now this is very much considered a real dawn. Do you think investors agree and they're willing to put their money down on plans to that volume?
I see a lot of appetite by investors. We as a company ourselves, we have as a business model also build on operate model. So we are happy to invest into those technologies and into those assets. And I'm sure our partners and competitors are willing as well. We also have good discussions with bank and investment companies. So there is a lot of appetite in the market. I'm not sure whether at the end of the day, it's really relevant that we exactly hit those $300 billion.
I don't even know how we would measure that.
Yeah, and but I'm very confident that we will speed up the economy and that a lot of investments will happen in this decarbonized and green environment.
Because the price of green hydrogen being cost competitive, 2030 keeps popping up. But even in just the last couple of weeks, the Hydrogen Council said 2028 on some scenarios might be possible, which is really just around the corner in terms of energy transition timelines. Do you feel this is realistic?
Yes, I think so. And we also have our own analysis. Of course, that's again a function of the renewables costs, the prices of electrolysis, and the CO2 prices. We think that roughly in a decade, we will be able to be cost competitive to gray hydrogen with our technologies. And also a lot of consultants and universities, they suggest something in a similar scenario. I mean, we have to be a bit careful. I think that probably the cost of electrolysis will, in 10 years time, will probably half of today's cost. So some like 50%. Nevertheless, we have to be a bit careful because we are not only talking electrolysis and stacks, we are also talking the entire equipment scenario, the piping, the balance of plant, and of course we have to add this up to those costs. Having said that, that's of course also relevant for all other forms of hydrogen, but we shouldn't be fooled by just this cheap prices for electrolysis in future, or this allegedly cheap prices of electrolysis in future.
It's not the silver bullet to get us there.
It's not the silver bullet. As I suggested, we also need, from all angles, we need to tackle it. The industry needs to do it. On the customer side, I think the customers need to be prepared also to invest into this green products. And that comes with a price. Personally, we all see that, that sometimes we have to spend a bit more for green and organic products. And of course, this is also the case for hydrogen. And on the political side, as I mentioned, we also need this additional momentum. We see this, we see the political vision, we see strategies in a lot of markets, in a lot of countries that are laid out. Of course, this has to be now transposed into law and regulations so that companies and customers can really grab it and have a framework which is certain for the next decade, and they can build their business model on.
I mean, at the very least, they need goalposts that they should be aiming for, in a relatively short amount of time. Do you think hitting these price points by 2030 or by 2028, do you think that requires an active import-export market? Do you think that's the only way we're going to see that sort of volume, that sort of market growth required?
I think it depends on the region and on the jurisdiction. In general, I am convinced that we will have this import and export market. And I'm convinced that in 10, 15 years time, we will talk about hydrogen in a similar way we're discussing natural gas and LNG today. For two reasons. First of all, let's start with the customer side. And as you can hear, I'm coming from Germany. So in Germany, there's a huge demand for hydrogen. And we will produce hydrogen, green hydrogen, in Germany and in Europe ourselves, no doubt about it. However, it will be by far not sufficient to meet customers' demand, and consequently, is
the approximate figure 70% of imports Germany needs? Is that correct?
Yeah, that is
quite high. Yeah, of hydrogen.
Quite high. However, Also in natural gas, I mean, we have 90% imports, for example. Yeah. So compared to other commodities, it's okay. So having said that, we need to import green hydrogen as a commodity as well. So that's the customer side. From the supplier side, there's huge opportunities for countries with high renewable resources, such as North Africa, such as the Middle East, Southern America, arguably Australia, and they will grab this opportunity and invest into the entire supply chain, and by that then produce green hydrogen and export it to importing nations such as Europe. So therefore,
we're seeing MOUs already, aren't we, between Saudi and Germany in the last few weeks? Yes,
there is a cooperation agreement between Saudi Arabia and Germany, between Canada and Germany. It's not limited to those cooperation agreements. These are political frameworks, and we are discussing projects with a lot of some more countries. So that's just a door opener. And I think there is this opportunity, and it will, at the end of the day, also make it cheaper, because transporting hydrogen, of course, there is a cost element in it. Well, a big cost at the moment, isn't it? It's a big bugbear. Yeah, it's a big cost component, and of course, you also need to discuss efficiency. So, depending on the form of transportation, you can transport hydrogen in a liquid form, or you can convert it into ammonia and then afterwards crack it and have hydrogen again. So, of course, you're losing some 20% depending on the transportation route of the energy content. But nevertheless, it pays off, because just the renewable resources are so much better, for example, in the Middle East than in Germany. Therefore, it's worth it. And consequently, we also, as a company, we are very keen to be involved in those projects covering the entire supply chain, and not only invest in Europe, but also participate in the commodity hydrogen, to trade hydrogen and supply hydrogen in a similar way we do it today with LNG. Because the route between the Middle East and Germany, would that be repurposing some of the natural gas pipelines as well? I know leakage can be one of the problems when it comes to doing such conversion, but would that be part of the plan? So having it shipped to the European shores, and then repurposing gas infrastructure thereon, or would it be a case of building new infrastructure completely dedicated to hydrogen? It would be both. We can certainly repurpose and upgrade current pipeline infrastructure, for example, in Europe. And the transmission system operators, they are already doing it. They have plans laid out of repurposing several thousand kilometers of pipeline in Europe, and that should be possible to make it feasible for hydrogen. So that's one element. The route from Middle East to Europe, that I believe will be most likely ships, that then transport either liquid hydrogen or ammonia, or arguably methanol into Europe, and then we would have import facilities similar to existing ones, and afterwards then transport it further in pipeline. So because we're seeing Saudi as well has done the first shipment over to Japan last year, and is following that up as well. So the region is beginning to pursue those ambitions, very much trying to talk the talk, walk the walk. Yes, absolutely. And shipping ammonia is common practice already. Shipping liquid hydrogen is yet to come. We also have some pilot projects, I believe, from Australia to Japan. So technically it's feasible. It might be more expensive than the ammonia method, but all in all, it's common technology to ship ammonia. So therefore, yes, we're already doing it. Blue ammonia from Saudi. I think it was the first time Saudi had been getting involved on that. We're talking about the Middle East, and we've touched on Australia and Japan and Europe, but which regions, countries worldwide do you see making particular progress by 2025, 2026, when it comes to building a hydrogen economy? It's a big question, so as much as you can distill, that would be brilliant. Yeah, and that is another half an hour probably. I know. Well, I see a lot of momentum from an industry and political side in Europe and in the Middle East. I can see that hydrogen strategy was laid out already in Japan and in Korea, for example. So these are certainly countries more on the consumer side that would, without any doubt, use a lot of hydrogen. Also, the USA will be a big market, I think, and what I can see is that the Biden administration has a stronger focus on decarbonization than the previous government. So
arguably, that's not too difficult.
Yeah, well, yes, I would agree. Nevertheless, I do like this ambition we have in the USA now for decarbonizing the environment, and consequently, I think green hydrogen will also be a big topic in the USA in the near future.
What do you see with China? Because they've indicated their interest, they've acknowledged that it is a market with huge potential, but it's not a deep part of their 5-year plan. Obviously, I think that was being crafted before the market really started showing all the potential that we're seeing now on the green side. So do you see them, and the policies of China are often relatively, for those 5-year plans, relatively stuck in stone? They don't tend to change dramatically once they're rolled out. Do you see China taking a different step and speeding up its hydrogen development sooner than perhaps expected?
As a second step, definitely. Yes, but arguably they are not a pioneer at the moment. Yeah.
Not so far. And that's surprising considering the work that they're doing in other renewables and how they've absolutely leapfrogged ahead in terms of progress then. And since 2020, roughly a year in, the hydrogen sector has been a new line of business for you at Uniper. How far has the company come with the technology in the last 12 months, considering, of course, there's been a very challenging and unique 12 months from a personal and business perspective?
Yeah, I think we have come a long way. And it's, I think, important to note that also prior to 2020, Uniper had been involved in the hydrogen business. So we are one of the pioneers of hydrogen. We constructed some facilities already 10 years back, some pilot plants to produce green hydrogen, 2 of them in Germany. Then last year, beginning of last year, together with the renewed strategy of Uniper, which basically lays out a plan to become carbon neutral in Europe by 2035. So that's just 14 years from now. We said, okay, hydrogen should be one of the main pillars of that strategy. And consequently, we said we have to speed up, and we have to hire more people and enlarge the team, and hence also then establish a business unit, hydrogen. And this business line is responsible for the entire value chain. So we are discussing investments and operations of hydrogen assets and facilities in Europe. But we are also very open to hydrogen as a commodity, as I said. So we are also reaching out to already existing relationships to natural gas and LNG suppliers globally to set up a framework for supply of hydrogen. So we are treating hydrogen as an asset and as a feedstock, but also as a commodity.
These conversations you're having, is there a response? There is enough energy demand going on that, yes, we can welcome hydrogen into it. Yes, we can start talking about converting, repurposing, hybrid use of infrastructure. There's so much energy demand, it's not a threat to us at all. Or are there some conversations with existing energy suppliers on LNG and gas thinking, oh, you know, this is going to start eating into my market share, and it's a bit concerning? What's the response been?
Well, that's an interesting question. The response is very positive. To be honest, of course, it's going to eat into our existing natural gas business, and same with LNG and natural gas suppliers such as Qatargas and Gazprom and Novatek, without any doubt. There will be some of the old existing value pools will be decreasing. However, from a company perspective, that is going to happen anyway. So the question is, from a company perspective, is the competitor going to grab it, or shall we do that ourselves? You can't prevent competition and progress, and we don't want to. And consequently, for us, it was a clear, yeah, let's go ahead with that. And I can see that also with a lot of our stakeholders and customers and suppliers who have exactly the same ambition and strategy to go ahead with the hydrogen business.
And cooperation in any new markets, again, hydrogen is not brand new, but the identity of which we're seeing now is a new brand of what many would understand to be hydrogen, especially when it comes to the green market. And cooperation is key to this, key to transparency, key to market growth, key to safety, key to international links, as we're talking very much about import and export structures here as well. How far do you think cooperation has gone so far? You've touched on it briefly, essentially collaborative or competitive collaborations between companies and countries. How important is that collaboration for success going forward, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an essential element of the success, because I can't see a single company that could cover the entire value chain.
No.
So we need this collaboration. And not only in a research perspective, but also then looking at business models. We need the cooperation between the natural suppliers, the renewable energy companies, the OEMs that provide the equipment, the suppliers and traders such as ourselves, and the ones who then would operate those assets. So we have so many elements in the value chain. For example, also storage of hydrogen in future. So it needs two to tango, and potentially more to tango. So therefore, for us, it's part of this.
You need a whole dance company, really.
Yeah, exactly. And we are very open to collaboration, to forming joint ventures, and we are very much used to that also with our traditional business to do that, because that is not so much different, that you need the strength of several companies, and we all have our strength and sweet spots, and I think it's best to make use of that.
It makes sense, doesn't it? It really makes sense. Just before we wrap up, I'd be really keen to hear, we're in March, just coming to the end of March now. I'd be really keen to hear from your personal perspective what state of progress you would like to see by December. If you had a wish list with the hydrogen market, and we'll zoom in on green, just because like we discussed, it's a huge area, so we'll zoom in on green. What level of progress would you like to see in the green hydrogen market by December?
Yeah, well, a good question. I would like to see some final investment decisions for more of those projects in Europe and also in the Middle East. So some real commitment. So far we have had a lot of announcements. So we need some real commitment and investment decisions, and also then some really corporations lined up to cover this entire value chain. So that means let's translate the ambitions and the announcements we have got now into real cases and into tangible results and contracts and opportunities. I think that is realistic by the end of the year, but it will also take some months, because it's a lot of money involved, and consequently also the final investment decisions are not just
no, indeed.
It needs some proper assessment, but I think that should be our target, to reach that by the end of the year.
And indeed, that has to stick to that sort of timeline if those news headlines that we've been seeing popping up like crazy for the last 6 months are to be realized, because they're pretty ambitious, and the clock is certainly ticking. Axel, thank you so much for joining us.